there's a common theme about diverse representation. And the theme goes something along these lines. We are not going to build solutions that empower everyone if we are not going to have diverse representation in building those solutions. And with that, allow me to invite to the stage Senator Rob Menendez.
Assalamu alaikum. I am pleased to be here. I always hesitate when I have to follow Congressman Pastorell, I can tell you. You never know. But I appreciate his leadership and his advocacy and standing up for all communities, but certainly this community in the United States Congress without reservation. So I appreciate his leadership. Let me say I'm glad to join you once again. And let me begin by recognizing the good work of the American Muslim Union and the entire Bergen County Muslim community for its grassroots community efforts to unite all of us of every faith and background around common concerns and shared values, and not allow isolationist rhetoric like we are hearing in the presidential race to divide us as a country. I know that there are many faith-based and elected officials here, many law enforcement and federal officials, as well as community and business leaders, and that is a testament to the good work that the American Muslim Union is doing in bringing people together. It is a tribute to the work that you do to address the basic issues we all face, not just Muslims, but all of us. The challenges of a middle class, of families struggling to get ahead, to realize their hopes and dreams and aspirations, the high cost of student loans and college tuitions, income disparity, Sandy relief, health care, national security that have an impact on all of us. Muslim Americans care about that as much as any one of us. So the theme that you have this year, American Muslim Integration, Achievements and Outlook for the Future, is a fitting one. And from my view, from our vantage point here in New Jersey, the outlook is bright. It is not a setting sun. It is a rising sun. And notwithstanding what we hear in the elections about banning Muslims from entering the United States or putting up a wall along the border, that is simply unacceptable, jingoistic rhetoric that should be universally denounced, universally denounced. It is inconsistent with American values. It's not who we are as a nation. And I always say, when I sit in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee or when I did it in the House Foreign Relations Committee, so I have pursued that interest for 24 years, that part of the power of America is not only the power of its military and its bombs, it's the power of its ideals and its ideas that send a beacon of light throughout the world, that stand for a certain set of universal principles enshrined in the Constitution of the United States, which what makes America worthy of fighting for and dying for. And so it is completely inconsistent with our values and the views of common sense, rational, intelligent Americans, many who have an immigrant past and whose families came here to integrate into American society, be part of the economic and social progress that is the heart of American culture. Now, I know that when people in public life come before you, they obviously are going to say things, hopefully they believe it, about the importance of you as part of the American fabric. But I think the most important moments is when you do not have those people before you, and when your community is being attacked. And that's why when, in fact, several years ago, I felt that illegally and unconstitutionally, your mosque, your businesses, and others were being surveillanced without any probable cause at all to surveillance you, I spoke out against that, and I said, this must stop. That is why I offered New Jersey's bias crime law years ago, because I wanted to make sure that if anybody ultimately had a crime committed against them because of their race, religion, or ethnic origin, that society would send a clear message that we would have, if convicted, a much higher penalty, so that we could speak with one voice in a societal way to reject those views. It is why, as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, when those individuals said that we should never consider accepting a Syrian refugee and just block them indiscriminately, without cause at the end of the day, I stood up and spoke out against that. They actually go through the most toughest of anyone who wants to come to the United States. The screening is just incredible. So I know that you need voices when they are not standing before you. And I believe that in many moments I have been that voice. Part of it is my own history of a family who fled to freedom to come to the United States. It does not compare to what we see today in the millions fleeing civil war in Syria. It does not compare to the wrenching image of a child washed up on a Mediterranean beach, the victim of a war-torn nation in a dangerous ocean crossing. But it is a story that is symbolic of the American experience. It is the essence of what America is. It is what has made us the greatest experiment in the history of mankind. It is what I believe when I hear American exceptionalism. That is part of what America exceptionalism is in the world. And it carries today on the stories and experiences of new immigrants to America, and their children and grandchildren, and all who are woven into the fabric of who we are. When my mother came here in search of freedom, she wanted to integrate herself into the American society. And I watched her, and I listened to her, and I learned from her. And I did what she told me, to work hard, to get a good education, to, in essence, embrace, even though I was born here, but for the rest of my family who had not, to embrace the essence of what America's values were. And if you told me growing up poor in a tenement, the son of political refugees, that I could rise to be one of 100 United States senators in a country of 314 million people, at that part of my life, I probably would have said, that's not possible. But it is the promise of America fulfilled. It is a promise that we must keep true for each generation of Americans, and that must also be true for Muslim Americans as a possibility in our country. And that is part of what I fight. We are reminded every day in the symbols of what America is and what its promises as we catch a glimpse of Lady Liberty or think of the thousands who came through Ellis Island. And yet, contrary to what we hear on the presidential campaign trail, at the end of the day, nothing, in my view, has diminished the dream of freedom and opportunity, nothing but the intensity of the rhetoric. But the extraordinary fear-mongering we hear is not who we are. I believe in my heart we are not xenophobic. We are inclusive and tolerant. And I believe we should take a lead role in the international effort to help resettle millions fleeing the devastation of civil war in Syria and the extremism of the Islamic State in the largest migration of displaced women, children, and families since World War II. So now is the time to summon our better angels, as the American Muslim Union has done, in focusing on the values every human being shares, on the hopes every human being has, in reaching out and bringing people together, and building on your achievements as a community. And I think about those achievements. Right here in New Jersey, Muslim leaders like Imam Mohammed Khatani of the Islamic Center of Passaic County, or Imam Mustafa El-Amin from Newark, or former Mayor Ali Chaudhry of the Islamic Society of Basking Ridge, or Judge Sohail Mohammed, or Imam Khalid Latif, the first Muslim chaplain at Princeton and NYU. I think about the many Muslim Americans that have served this country. The former United Nations ambassador, Salami Kahalisan, who was appointed by George W. Bush to be the United States UN ambassador, to speak for us on the world stage. I think about Kareem Rashid Khan, who wore the uniform of the United States and died in the service of his country in Iraq. I think of Mohammed El Erraim, the CEO of PIMCO, a manager of $1 trillion globally, here from the United States. I think of Javeed Karim, the co-founder of YouTube. I think of how we cheered Muhammad Ali in the boxing ring, or how we cheered Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on the basketball court, or when we listen to Dr. Mehmet Oz and believe that what he tells us is what we need to do for our health. Or, for that fact, when we think about the world stage and put on CNN and see Fareed Zakaria talking about our global position. These are Muslim Americans that have been celebrated throughout our history. We did not think of them as Muslim Americans. We simply thought of them as Americans. All of us, no matter what religion or political party, need to hear those voices, not the voices of those who play to the worst instincts, our worst insecurities, our worst fears. Our history, when we have allowed ourselves to play to the worst fears, is not a history that we are proud of. And that is what we must beat back today. So let me close by saying I thank very much those of you who are working to hold the center. In 42 years of public life, I can tell you that governing is never from extremes, left or right. It is about who holds the center. And I appreciate, under all the challenging circumstances that you face in your daily lives, your effort to hold the center. Attempting to hold the center when the world seems to be moving to extremes is an incredible challenge. But I believe those of us who seek to hold that center hold the promise of what America is, and that is the promise of the American Muslim Union. Thank you very much for having me.
With that, prepare yourself to be challenged, excited, and inspired. I'd like to invite to the stage Dr. Jonathan Brown, our keynote speaker. Dr. Jonathan Brown. So before we start, I'd like to give a brief bio about Dr. Jonathan A.C. Brown. He received his BA in history from Georgetown University in 2000. He received his PhD in languages and civilization from the University of Chicago in 2006. He is Al-Walid bin Talal Chair of Islamic Civilization at Georgetown University. He's also the director of Al-Walid bin Talal Center for Muslim-Christian Understanding at Georgetown University. He studied and conducted research in many countries such as Syria, Egypt, Turkey, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, South Africa, India, Indonesia, and Iran. He also published many books and publications. His recent book is Misquoting Muhammad. And speaking of diversity, Dr. Brown speaks multiple languages, or can carry out conversation in multiple languages: English, Arabic, Persian, Turkish, Latin, French, and German.
Not really Latin, but you know.
Dr. Jonathan Brown, everyone.
Thanks very much. You can press the source button. Okay, should be computer one. By the way, what do you feed your kids here? This new committee is, they think they're all about 6'2", 6'3". Never seen so many. I mean, let's just say I felt intimidated when I went to the room with them. But a lot of them are lawyers, so. Well, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, thanks very much for inviting me. I am going to time myself. And it's my second time here, and glad that I didn't so offend people last time that they didn't invite me back. I should also say I'm Muslim, so I'm speaking as a Muslim here, also as an academic. When they gave me, there should be some pictures, not too much text, if you can see all the way over there. But otherwise, I'll try and communicate everything just verbally. When they asked me to give this presentation on the idea of American Muslims' contributions and accomplishments, it was actually very tough to prepare for. As a professor, I would give Senator Menendez an A because he came with a lot more names than I did. When I was trying to figure out, what can I, did a Muslim invent ice cream or something like that? What can I point to? I said Dave Chappelle's Muslim, and people like him a lot. And then Ryan Harris, the offensive tackle for the Denver Broncos, he's Muslim, became Muslim in 8th grade. But then I was starting to think to myself, you know, probably the biggest accomplishment American Muslims have done so far is just surviving from the time of slavery in the 1700s. And this is Muhammad Yarrow. He died in 1823. He was actually a slave who was brought to the United States from West Africa, and then he became a free man. He lived actually in Georgetown in Washington, D.C., where I live. So Muslims have survived, and now they're surviving really horrendous bigotry. And this is just, I mean, you can just see people, for example, this man's Islamophobic and proud of it. This is something that I really want you to pause and think about. In Irving, Texas, there's a group of armed sort of sovereign citizen people who stand guard outside this mosque in Irving, Texas, heavily armed with machine guns. You can see just following the Muslims around as they walk in and out of the mosque to make sure that they're not trying to take over the country or something. I mean, imagine what it's like to have somebody with a machine gun following you around. I think absolutely terrifying. This stuff is happening in the United States today. This is the kind of thing Muslims are living with. And it shows the incredible bravery of American Muslims, I have to say, that they do this. And they live this, and they don't stop going to the mosque. They don't stop dressing as their religion instructs them. Here's just an advertisement on the side of a bus. Islamic Jew hatred, it's in the Quran. Again, people who hate Islam, who don't understand Islam, who are ignorant, who are bigoted, they're telling everybody, they're telling Muslims what their religion says, which is, of course, completely inaccurate. It's always the right of a religious community to decide what its own religion says. We all know the story of the Ahmed the Clock kid, who was first turned in by his teacher and then taken to the law enforcement officials because he had brought this clock into class. This guy's a real American. He played the situation well. Now he's got his college paid for by the Qatari government or something like that. So this guy's he's a pretty good American, I think. And then sometimes it becomes, it gets so bad that you actually have murders, as in the case about a year ago of the murder of 3 completely innocent students, graduate students in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Dia and his wife and her sister all murdered by somebody who was so overcome with his hatred of religion and of Islam particularly, he decided to murder these 3 people. But then as I was thinking more about the topic, what are the accomplishments and contributions of American Muslims, I suddenly realized that that's actually the wrong question. And it's the wrong way to frame this issue, because it really does not accurately portray the nature of the American experiment and the nature of the regime of constitutional rights that we all enjoy and to which we're all committed. If you think about different models for thinking about what it means to maybe make it in America or be American, it occurred to me there's 3 different models you could think of. There's what I call the Martin Scorsese model, kind of Gangs of New York, The Departed, where, as Jack Nicholson says in his monologue at the beginning of The Departed, no one's going to give you anything, you have to take it. Or that in the movies like the Gangs of New York, where America is portrayed as this collection of motley crew groups of different immigrant origins just fighting against each other, and eventually somehow they all work out some arrangement, and each group sort of seizing its different territory and its different rights. Very combative, agonistic model. And then there's a second model, which I call the Club America model. And this is interesting because I think this really informs the way we talk about citizenship and the way we talk about rights. So let's say you have to earn, someone has to earn the right to be American. What have you contributed? What have you paid in? So here's the idea that America is this club, and you kind of have to earn the right to be in it. You come here as a group, let's say Muslims or South Asians or Arabs, they come here and they have to perform, they have to accomplish something to show they're worthy of being part of the club. Now, these 2 models, the Martin Scorsese model, sorry for defaming Martin Scorsese, but he likes to make movies about this stuff, and the Club America model, these really, I think, inform the way we think about this question a lot, but they're not accurate at all. They're not accurate at all, because you don't have to do anything to have your rights as a citizen in this country. If you're born in this country, if you're an American citizen, you have the rights guaranteed you by the Constitution. You don't have to pay for that right. You don't have to, this isn't Sparta. You don't have to go through some kind of training program where you show you're worthy of calling yourself an American. We talk about the fact that you have to earn rights, but that's not actually how the Constitution works. That's not actually how rights in this country function. You have these rights because they're either inalienable, as expressed in the Declaration of Independence, or they're constitutionally guaranteed. So you have a right to freedom of expression. You have a right to free exercise of your religion. You have the right to freedom of association. You have the right to express your political opinion. You have the right to lobby government for redress of grievances. You have the right to lobby legislators to influence their agendas in the way you think is proper. These are things that these are rights every American has by dint of being American. So when we talk about what have Muslims accomplished, or what have they contributed, we have to remember, rights aren't here to protect the powerful. Rich people, powerful people don't need rights, as poor people do. It's the vulnerable that need rights. It's the marginalized groups that need rights. It's the people who are victimized that need rights. The people who are discriminated against who need rights. It's the people who suffer from tremendous populist, nativist anger, like we're seeing today in the presidential campaign. We've seen really since 2010, when Islamophobia in this country really became intense. These are the people who need rights. So telling someone that, who needs rights, who needs their rights protected, that they have to contribute something to earn those rights, it's not only inaccurate for the American system, it's basically asking those people who need the protection the most to do something to earn them. Now, that's not accurate. It's not accurate. It also leads to and contributes to this general discourse we see, this pattern, which is, why don't Muslims, and then just insert the demand here, why don't Muslims condemn ISIS more? Why don't Muslims speak out against terrorism? Why don't Muslims try better to integrate? Why don't Muslims do this, that, and the other? Now, when I was up in my room before this, I just thought, I'm just going to Google, do Muslims condemn ISIS? Figure that's something that someone might Google, right? I just kept looking through page after page after page of search results. It was all either Muslims condemning ISIS, or articles about Muslims condemning ISIS, or articles about how stupid a question it is to ask, do Muslims condemn ISIS, because so many Muslims condemn ISIS. I've actually never met any Muslim who doesn't condemn ISIS. How could you possibly ask this question? The reason is, this bigotry is not reasonable. I can sit here and Senator Menendez gave his list of American Muslims who contributed to American society. I had my smaller list, but I did have pictures. Okay, I had my smaller list. But guess what? None of that matters, because if you Google "do Muslims condemn ISIS," you will find such a massive wall of evidence that they do that you think no reasonable person looking at evidence and making a decision. Bigotry is not reasonable. You can't argue against it. Similarly, the idea, what can Muslims do to help end Islamophobia? I mean, we do our best. We tell people what we believe. We try to make them understand our religion in an accurate way. We put up with a lot of discrimination. But guess what? It's not the victim of bigotry who is responsible for curing bigotry. Bigotry is a disease in the hearts of those people who discriminate against others and indulge bigotry. This is a very important point to make. It is the responsibility of the American society to eliminate these sentiments from its heart. It is not the responsibility of a disenfranchised, embattled minority that suffers from this bigotry.